95.1 FM, 790 AM. This is KFYO Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin. And on line one is our state representative, John Frullo. Good morning, John. Long time no see.
That's right. Good morning, Dave. Good morning, Matt. How are you folks today?
We're doing well. This month is, I believe, I'm going to have to see if because it's a long word, but it's Human Slavery and Trafficking Awareness Month. Is that right? I think
that is correct.
So you've done a lot in the Texas House to write bills and work with human trafficking. Now, lately we've been hearing more and more about it. So, you probably know a lot more than I do, but is this a problem that is getting worse, or is this a problem that is just people are willing to talk about it now?
Well, I think, Matt, what's happening, I've been working on this for over 10 years now, and what the first steps of this had to do with was just identification, letting people know what it is, and not only all of us, but also where it is happening. Nobody thinks it's happening in their town. And when I started working on this, Lubbock had some of the biggest problems in the state. If you remember back to the big problem that they had at the Overton Hotel and what all was going on there. And so it happens everywhere. One of the things that's also very disturbing is 1 out of every 5, or 20% of the people involved in human trafficking come through Texas at some point. And so Texas is a big player in this. And so the steps were, first off, to identify and say, hey, this is what's happening. This is what human trafficking is. And then we started working with law enforcement, helping them identify when those situations were there, things to look for, people, what to look for, looking at the places where this happens, whether it's, maybe massage parlors or even beauty parlors, places like that, restaurants. A lot of times people who are being trafficked didn't even realize they were being trafficked because that was just kind of the life that they were used to. And so it's awareness, and every time you shine a spotlight on something, then people start noticing it and they see it more often. So it has to do a lot with that. It has to do with making the laws tougher. It has to do with appropriating more money, which we have done. It's just a whole gamut of different things that we've been working on for a long time, and it is making a difference.
Well, John, I'll tell you, I've said on this show a number of times, we're seeing things in Lubbock that we just used to not see. I mean, shootings, for example. And the other thing, you see this story just repeats itself over and over about human trafficking, and that's something new to me. I just rarely ever heard of a situation like that. Now, are they trafficking is basically girls? Is it not?
Primarily, it is
for the sex trade.
Exactly, and underage, but it's both sexes.
Well,
that are involved in that.
And it's all ages, I guess.
It is, yes.
But mostly underage girls.
Underage and young girls is what it is. Exactly, yeah. Dave.
So let me ask you this: it's this. I guess my thoughts are: would looking at illegal immigration and trying and enforcing that, would that help this problem as well?
Well, I think in part of it is, that's all. It all works together to some extent, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. A lot of times it's runaways that get involved in it. I guess to get back to what David mentioned earlier, the Voice of Hope assisted 55 sex trafficking victims back in 2016 is the numbers that I have. 21, or again, that 1 out of 5, involved people that were 21 years or younger. In 27%, or nearly, a little over a quarter of them received some type of medical attention. But that's numbers right here in Lubbock, and those are the ones that we know about and that they helped.
Mm. Geez, that's really something. So, do you think you're making progress on this situation?
Well, we are, and there's a number of things that we have done, at the legislative event where I'm involved. And, of course, as you said, Dave, it isn't that it didn't exist before. It's just now that we're noticing it. We're noticing it when, officers and troopers pull over somebody, and it's like, to look for these particular items, make note of these particular items, and oftentimes that's where the whole process starts. Back in 2011, we had to work really hard. We were trying to get $1.3 million to put into what they call ICAC, or Internet Crimes Against Children, and that's the sickest individuals out there trading these pornographic images of literally kids. And these people watch for it, look for it. We were trying to, at that time there were three main areas that we were trying to get funded so that they can do that. Now, fast forward about a decade, last legislative session, we appropriated about $28 million for human and child sex trafficking investigation squads. There are some anti-gang squads and regional human trafficking. $5.5 million at TABC. Of course, they're in charge of the alcohol and the sales of that. $3.5 million in the AG's office, and of course the AG has always been active in this. Both when Governor Abbott was in the AG's office, and of course Cecilia Abbott, his wife, have been extremely active in this, and Nick working on that National Association, a National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. $1.5 million for the establishment by the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulations. We passed a bill last session that had to do with you can't sleep at a massage parlor, and that's what was happening is people were being forced to work and sleep and active in this activity, and they wouldn't even leave those places, and so we said you can't.
So they were essentially jailed there.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And then you start getting into when, different people come from other countries. What they'll do is they'll hold them in these places and say, if you do something, here's a picture of your family, of your brother, of your sister, of your mom and your dad. We will do bad things to them if you don't stay here.
Wow. Mm.
And so there's, you just get into the depths of it. What has also happened is we found out that when people were being incarcerated, one thing is that they weren't going after, the law enforcement was not going after these same say if somebody was caught with drugs and human trafficking, something like that, they wouldn't go after the human trafficking side, the sex trafficking side, because the penalties weren't as severe as the drug side. Makes sense. Go after them for that. So what we did is we elevated those penalties to where it was worth it, and that they could be, used in conjunction with those others. The other thing that, in essence, people were going to prison and they were learning how to get into sex trafficking, human trafficking. You sell drugs one time. Once it's sold, you have to go get more drugs to sell. In sex trafficking area, you don't do that. You keep selling. And so, it's a second largest but fastest growing segment of, I guess you could call criminal activity.
All right.
Yeah.
Representative Frullo, we've got to take a break. Can you hang over one more segment?
You bet.
All right. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
And we are back, Dave and Matt in the morning here on KFYO. And we're going to resume our conversation with our state representative, John Frullo.
That's right. House District 84, I believe.
Yeah.
Representative Frullo, I just kind of, one of the questions I had is, what does it look like things are moving toward legislatively that we might see in the next few years that are going to help even more?
Well, I think what we're doing is just looking and seeing where the problems are, what is happening, and of course a lot of it is appropriating money, and sometimes it's not necessarily even appropriating money, but just using existing resources. So much time has gone into just the training, which is not necessary. It is costing something, but not terribly a lot. probably about 8 years ago, decided to use a form when troopers pull somebody over that was already existing. It was in the software. And what happened when we took a step back and started looking at the information that was filled out on a particular line in there, we started getting a lot more information. So what it is just working, identifying, reaching out. The groups that are working on this now is unbelievably, and people are buying into what it is and, learning about it and saying, my goodness, this is a problem. This is tragic. Just recently, it was in October, there was a bunch of billboards statewide. It started out in Houston with the "Can You See Me" billboards, and what it would do is picture a person that was involved in human trafficking, a victim, and it would talk about it. And that started with Cecilia Abbott, and of course Governor Abbott's child sex trafficking team. Our own Carl Tepper with Lamar Signs was there. It was put on at, it started, and they had 2 signs down at Fiesta Motors on Frankfurt where you could look at 2 different billboards and just see these signs. The mayor was there. Of course, I heard you speaking about his address later on today, but he spoke, a number of folks spoke. So part of it is just getting that information out and saying, hey, this could be human trafficking, sex trafficking, and it is a problem, making it aware. Each session, I've worked on legislation to either make the laws tougher, make them, harder to get by. A lot of it had to do with giving law enforcement the tools they need to go after these people that are involved in this. So we're working on it, and I think that's where the laws will continue to go and help these victims. A lot of the victims, again, are young kids. They're just in a terrible situation and see no way to get out. A lot of it has to do with different groups, nonprofit groups working on it that we've seen here, Open Door, groups like that, helping the victims. So that's what it is. The community getting involved, and legislatively, cities getting involved, and of course you doing what you're doing, and that's spreading the news on the radio, letting people know, hey, it is a problem. So I applaud you for that.
Well, John, we'd love to hear more from you. You stay in touch. We'd like to have you on the show from time to time and bring us up to speed on what's happening down there in Austin. What other things? A lot
of good things.
Yeah.
Do what now?
I said there's a lot of good things, and the easiest way to look at that is we're doing the right stuff down there in Austin because people are moving here. They're voting with their feet. They're moving to our state, and so
do we view that as a good thing or not?
Well, the problem is they bring everybody with them, including their bad ideas. And so it's good and bad, but I'd much rather have that problem than something like Detroit, where they're having a hard time keeping their folks there.
Yeah, it'll be like a state like California, and you heard what Bloomberg said. California is a model for the United States.
Yeah, that's. I don't think so.
Oh, geez, I don't either. I don't know what's going on in his head. But anyway, John, we're up against the clock. Got to run. Again, good to hear from you. Stay in touch, would you?
Likewise. Yeah. Thank you, gents.
Thanks for coming on.
Bye-bye.